Ahoj, tady je Michal Toman, vítám vás u dalšího dílu Evolve Stories. Dneska natáčíme na konferenci Evolve Summit, takže se můžete těšit na první díl, který bude kompletně celý v angličtině. So, guys, welcome to the new episode of Evolve Stories. As I mentioned in the introduction, this is going to be the first episode that we shoot in English. And the reason for this is that we are shooting this episode at Evolve Summit, and we have a special guest. And the guest is the one and only Johnny Campbell from Social Talent. Johnny, welcome.
Thank you, Michael. Good to be here.
So, this is your first time at Evolve Summit.
Yes.
How do you like it here?
Love it. I've never been at an event quite like this. I've never been at an event where you have all these activities spread out across 3 levels of a car park in this beautiful auditorium upstairs. The attention to detail is fantastic. The variety of speakers is just surprising. You'd expect this in a major city in the UK or US, but you guys have brought something amazingly special to Brno.
So is it crazy enough?
Yeah, we haven't had drinks yet, so I'll answer that later on.
You'll see. Yeah, this is still the first day. Yeah, so we are before the after party. Yeah, it's coming in an hour.
Yes,
so.
for sure.
Yeah, I remember actually Greg Savage was at the first event, 5 years ago, and after the conference, he wrote an article, and it was called like 5 crazy things you can only see at a conference in Czech Republic.
And that man has seen a lot of crazy things in his life, so.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Johnny, you gave quite an interesting presentation in the morning, and it was about work skills in the labor force. Could you tell us something more about the presentation and about the content?
For sure. So, I guess in short, we're going to see over the next decade an accelerating shift in the type of skills that we need in the marketplace. So we're going to see a move away from manual skills, for sure. It's probably no surprise for anybody, but also away from some of the basic cognitive skill roles we've hired for the last 2 decades. And we're going to see an acceleration in the shift towards social and emotional skills. We're going to see a shift towards higher cognitive skills, higher data processing and numeracy skills, and more towards obviously IT skills, but not the IT skills that you might think around programming, but basic digital skills in all roles. And that's probably not a massive surprise, but it does make a massive difference to our industry, as the current profile of the workforce isn't a match for the workforce we'll see in 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. So when you look to see what we do as an industry, we hire people. Going out and hiring people to fulfill the needs of organizations and the changing skills is not going to work. You see in the European Union, you see there is just a lack of talent available in the market with skills that we need. And in the US, it's the same. You have more open roles than you have people available. So there's a mismatch of skills. We don't have the skills out there to fulfill the needs that are there right now and coming. So what do we do about this? So I shared some insights from McKinsey Consulting and the surveys they did with lots of companies and employees several years ago. And they saw different attitudes with the US and European companies. The US companies said they would largely hire their way out of this problem. But as I've already mentioned, there aren't enough people, it's impossible. The Europeans said they are going to largely retrain their workforce with some rehiring of skills. I think that's the mature approach, that's the approach that's going to work. But if that is the next decade, you have to ask yourself, what is the impact on recruiters? If all we do is bring external talent to businesses, what's that going to mean for us for the next 10 years? If the companies are going to fulfill their skills shortages by largely retraining their people with some hiring, I wanted to try and answer and address that question of what it means for our hiring industry.
Okay, so you're saying that we are moving more to like technical skills, because we will need that in future much more. Because is it happening because of all the technology around us, or social networks? What's influencing these changes?
So it's a great question, right? So the biggest driver is the combination of what's called AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, whatever you want to call it, but better computer processing and automation. So you see this in an area you're familiar with, engineering and manufacturing and production. 20, 30 years ago, you could work in a manufacturing plant and be purely manual. You had a manual job. but you probably know more than me, most jobs in a factory involve some interaction with some sort of computer systems. You're managing machines, you're managing some sort of technology. And a lot of the prior manual roles of 30 years ago are largely redundant or gone. So there's been a shift even in a traditional manual manufacturing environment to manual plus using systems and software. So you do have to have a basic knowledge of these tools. I'm not saying everybody's going to be a programmer, but you see that a lot of the very manual, purely manual roles, they're being replaced by technology right now. Many have been replaced already, right?
Okay.
And it's the pace of that, Mike, that's really, really changing things. So we've gone through these revolutions many times before, the computer revolution 30 years ago, industrial revolution, et cetera, et cetera. But the time frame in which the change happened was over decades. This is going to happen over a small number of years. And that's the big thing that's different this time around, is the pace of change.
So if we're going to need all the different skills that we do not have at the moment, how do we get them? Do you think that schools or education in general will be able to provide that, or how should the companies get ready for this?
Many companies are already ready for this. I think there are numerous providers out there that are doing this well. So we're in the ed tech space ourselves as Social Talent. We educate recruiters and hiring managers on how to hire and lead their teams. So we produce niche content in that area. But there's so many other companies like us who do this across the spectrum of skills that are out there. So you see companies like Pluralsight that are one of the big providers of technical skills, trained developers. You see LinkedIn Learning being deployed in many, many businesses. You see aggregating LXP tools like Degreed and others doing this. There's so many players in the learning space that are solving this. And companies like Harvard and MIT are putting their courses online. There are many, many different sources. In fact, sometimes too many sources. It's confusing. But you see a lot of businesses getting this right. But companies themselves and organizations are taking more of an active role in education. We previously required third level education, second level educations to actually do this, and professional bodies. They're responsible for training our workforce. But increasingly companies realize they are responsible for constantly evolving the skills. You don't just hire an accountant and then she works for you as an accountant forever. The role of that accountant will change every 24 months. And you need to be able to skill her whilst she delivers on her job. So there's this on-the-job training and this kind of more digital-driven training that we're seeing across organizations. And it's not even training, it's more learning, the provision of learning. So that's a big, big topic in the L&D and talent world. How do you basically do that? And it's not simple, it's complex. It requires you to know what people need to learn, have the right content or training available, and then allow them to practice that, use that in the business. And most organizations aren't really set up well for that. So if you look at surveys of CEOs, do you have confidence in your L&D organization and L&D services? You're talking sometimes single-digit responses to yes. Not even 10% saying they have confidence. So the CEOs are very worried about talent. It's the number one worry internally of CEOs, according to the Conference Board survey a couple of months ago in 2019. Number one issue for them. But the solution, which should be, well, let's retrain people, they have the least confidence in that department to do that.
Okay, that's interesting. It actually reminds me that tomorrow we are going to have like two very interesting presentations from Carolina and Peter, and they are going to talk about Generation Z and also the generation of students at the moment. And what Carolina is mentioning in the presentation is that because she's attending a lot of schools, working with a lot of students from elementary schools to secondary schools, and what she describes is that she can see that the skills or character of students is changing. That empathy is going lower and lower a little bit. Technical skills going up due to all the technology around the kids. But what she also is describing that for example the students or the kids are really hungry for instant feedbacks. That might be demotivating them in future. If managers are not really able to work with them in the proper way. So my idea behind that is because nowadays in Central and Eastern Europe we talk about like a completely difficult market as for like the unemployment rate is so low, yeah, that companies are now hiring just people that maybe they are not the best fit, yeah, but they are able to do the job, yeah. They don't really care about skills at the moment, yeah. So do you think that the situation will change, yeah? Because I think that we are now moving, yeah, with this generation to the generation where it's not be about like Java developers not be able to develop in Java, yeah, but about candidates not having the characters, yeah, the companies needs.
I think the big difference is adaptability. I think you don't solve this by asking the universities and schools to skill everybody, because by the time they've skilled them, those skills will be redundant.
Yes.
Okay, so this is a real challenge for formal education. But what you can teach them is how to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And this is kind of what Accenture a couple of years ago referred to as the learning quotient, the LQ, as opposed to EQ and IQ. And this concept of adaptability, as it's called in other areas, is how do we make the future workforce more adaptable? So we less have a workforce of accountants, lawyers, doctors, engineers. Mm-hmm. We have people who may be creative, technical, but they can be technical in different areas, and they, over their career, will probably change jobs and adapt new skills, drop some skills, acquire new skills in other areas, and keep learning. But they'll also have to work more together. So there are core common skills. Some of the softer skills, as they've been traditionally called, are what I prefer to call the human skills. How do you collaborate, work together as teams and projects? And how do you have more resilience, which is an interesting trait that seems to be absent from that generation coming out of school at the moment. So the flip side of having this need for constant feedback is that they don't have resilience. When they say they want feedback, they want praise. And again, it's different in different cultures. You know, there's more of a need for a praise culture in the US than there is in France, for example.
Okay.
But you see this in different sectors, particularly what you might call the centennials, those born in the 21st century who are entering the workforce now, the professional workforce. They, in nearly all markets, will have low resilience. So they cannot take defeat, they cannot take negative reactions. And as you know, the workforce is full of negativity because things don't always go right. So it's balancing how do you build up this resilience today, build up their skills to collaborate, their ability to adapt and learn. That's what they need to learn in school and in college. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily Java programming, right?
Yes.
But if you've got the base mathematics, how do you basically solve concepts? How do you work together in teams? The work environment is different to the school environment. It's getting better and getting closer. In work, we don't work all year round for a big project at the end of 9 months and then start again next year. We're constantly working in sprints these days. So, I see some great signs in education where in some schools they have kids working in sprints, 2-week sprints, working together, changing tasks, and they're learning this ability to work on a project for a short period of time with a bunch of people, stop, deliver, and then move on to something else.
Okay.
And they're working in this kind of environment, which doesn't mean that they will work in software development. It's just that they are used to getting to work in the way that organizations are moving to, which will make it much easier for them to adapt to the new workforce. So I think, the type of person I'd like to hire out of schools over the next 5-10 years is someone who understands how to collaborate, work in teams, work to deliver on expectations quite rapidly, and can adjust their priorities quickly, are resilient. And I think that's the role of formal education, is how do you build that base of aptitude so that when they go into the workforce, corporates can begin to give them the skills that are necessary today for today's job, and also change that over time.
So do you also think, because if all these changes are going to happen or are happening at the moment, how will it impact the skills of recruiters, of sources, or CEOs of these people?
So it's a great point. So one of the big trends in the last 3 years has been that recruiters have been told that we need to partner better. We need to become talent acquisition partners, recruitment partners, whatever you want to call it. And we need to influence more. We need to, rather than just take a job spec and source for it, we need to decide what should we source for example. Do we have the right spec? So you see an increase in organizations who are teaching recruiters how to do more research, produce macro data. microdata being a list of candidates, macro being the trends of those candidates in different markets. If I can influence you as the hiring manager, Mikkel, to say, well, you know what, if we change these 10 requirements, if we change 3 of them, I can open up a bigger candidate pool with more diversity to be more inclusive and give you lower cost and higher chance of hiring. You might say, well, let's do that. That changes my role. I need the skills of a sourcer to be able to find that data and influence you. But if I have great automation tools, I probably have a better piece of software to do the searches and produce a long list in 2 seconds. But what I need to do is figure out what information am I giving to the software. Because if the software can do the searching better than a human, and you're getting to the point where you have software that can do better sourcing than sourcers, we still have to tell the machine what to look for. And that's where I think we need to invest in different skills, influencing skills, the ability to understand multiple sources of complex data. So these are higher cognitive skills, they're persuasion skills, and these are the things that I think you'll see recruiters doing more and more. Less of the administration of a search and organization of a job role, and more how do we basically influence all the different stakeholders? How do I get better at influencing the hiring manager, but also how do I get better at making an offer, understanding before I make an offer to a candidate, I have to have understood her whole wants and desires throughout that journey, built a relationship so that I can influence her. So it's more of those softer or human skills, more of those higher cognitive skills, less of the manual stuff we've been doing for the last 10 years.
So tell me about how you think about sourcing, future sourcing, because we can now see that I understand that it's getting like more into like being able to consult, to help the managers to make the right decisions, but I can also hear some feedbacks, that actually sourcing will be replaced by like platforms where you just fill in the keywords and there will be booleans at the back. You will not need to learn booleans anymore, because the platform will do the booleans for you and you will just get results. How do you find this?
I agree and disagree. So an analogy I'll use is a pilot, right? So a pilot these days flies a plane, a big Boeing or whatever, and she's not actually controlling all the levers. There's a huge amount of technology that automates a lot of what happens. But you want that pilot on that plane because you want that extra element of human judgment, because you're not completely reliant on the computer systems, because flying a plane is a complex environment that includes weather systems that are unpredictable, includes passengers that are unpredictable as well. So you want that human element to control that. And you don't want the pilot to have never understood the basics of flying. So a pilot is still trained on the really basic stuff. They'll never have to use those skills, but you want them to know it and know how it all works, even though technology is doing it for them. I think the same goes in recruiting. A sourcer may not actually write Boolean search strings in the future. She may not have to put all that information together, but you want her to know how the machine is doing it. Yes, the machine is faster at it than her, maybe more accurate, but she needs to tweak and control and make judgments about whether the machine is accurate or not accurate, and try and influence that. And for that, I still think you need to understand those basics, even if you're not using them every day.
And at Social Talent, you've got a platform to teach sources to source. So what's the skills that you are teaching them right now? Is it still like Booleans, or is it more like into the higher level of sourcing? What's the most trendy in sourcing training?
But we teach sources to source, recruiters to recruit, branders to brand, hiring managers to manage, leaders to lead.
Okay.
It's quite broad.
Complex.
It's a broader life cycle of talent. And it's expanded from its original base 6-7 years ago of teaching sources to source, because there's a bigger team that make hiring decisions. And even then, if you look at the life cycle, typically we would have ended the recruiting life cycle at hire. We are increasingly adding training in 2020, for example, on how to onboard, how to pre-board, onboard, how to get the most out of the person in the first 90 days, acclimatize them to your culture, get them working in your team dynamic, start your first performance appraisals. That's not traditionally something you would think of as part of recruiting. But if you don't do that well, the person leaves and becomes a new vacancy again. So we're seeing that, last year, for example, we introduced training on negotiation, a really detailed training on negotiation, on all the different stages of recruiting and the different parties you have to negotiate with. We introduced training on how to do reference checks and the sensitivities around reference checks, for example, around the world. We introduced new training on branding and how you influence the market so that candidates have a receptive view of your organization, how you better manage that. And of course, we updated things like how do you do Boolean searching, sourcing, message people. But increasingly, Michael, to answer that question, the training is leaning more towards those higher cognitive skills, social and emotional skills, and then obviously how do you better use the technology in front of you? How do you work with AI and machine learning as opposed to just saying, well, they do part of my job. So it's becoming more complex, more interesting, I think. And I think the skills that recruiters are learning on our platform and we're increasingly adding to our library, they're skills you can use in more jobs as well. And they're more interesting, right? They're the human skills. How do we work with people? How do we work with more complex information? We're moving away from the administration. But not every organization is doing it at the same pace. So we have to provide all of that knowledge because we have to cater for the company who still has very manual processes, because there are many of them, as you know. And you have to cater for the big enterprises who are doing this on scale with a huge amount of technology and everything in the middle.
Perfect. Sounds good. Yeah, I really keep the fingers crossed for you. Yeah, to help the market, to get to better sourcing, better recruiting, because I think this is what's helping the companies a lot. Yeah, to understand where the market is going, but not only to understand, but having a partner to be able to help them to get there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, well, thank you very much for sharing all the information, insights, interesting insights. And thanks for joining us at Evolve Stories, and happy for the Evolve Summit that we made it this year.
Thanks for having me. Let's go get a pint.
Exactly.